There is a unique kind of trench warfare that exists only in the hospitality industry. If you survive it, you earn a sixth sense for human audacity. You learn to spot the quiet, gracious diners, the anxious first-timers, and most dangerously, the apex predators. The entitled tyrants who view a dining room as their personal kingdom. But there is a special, fiery circle of hell reserved for a very specific breed of customer. The industry insider. The one who knows exactly how hard the job is, knows precisely how the machinery works, and chooses to weaponize that knowledge to break a trainee's spirit just for the thrill of the power trip. If you ever decide to play that game, you had better make sure you are untouchable. Because if you aren't, the retaliation won't just ruin your dinner, it will dismantle your entire livelihood. Back in the hazy, caffeine-fueled days of 2015, I was drowning in nursing school textbooks by day and balancing trays of roasted marrow and duck confit by night. I worked at Oak Haven Provisions, an upscale, fiercely independent bistro that flat-out refused to advertise. The owners believed that if the food was flawless and the service impeccable, the whispers of the city would fill the seats. They were right. The place was a local legend, built entirely on word of mouth and a fiercely protective internal culture. Management didn't just back us up, they treated us like a phalanx. By my 7th month, I had earned my stripes. I wasn't officially a trainer, but I was the designated safety net. When the actual trainers unleashed a greenhorn onto the floor, I was the one hovering in the adjacent section, ready to catch them when they inevitably stumbled into the weeds. Enter Garrick. Garrick was a man in his late 50s, recently restructured out of a comfortable corporate desk job and thrust into the chaotic, unforgiving world of food service. He was a gentle soul, soft-spoken, perpetually anxious, and terrified of making a mistake. He had the kind of nervous energy that made him triple-check every water glass and apologize to the floorboards if he dropped a napkin. He was also incredibly kind, the sort of man who brought in donuts for the dish pit and remembered everyone's middle name. On a muggy Tuesday evening, Garrick was finally given his first solo section. It was a modest arrangement of 4 tables, nestled right against my own territory. I had my eye on him, ready to swoop in the moment his eyes glazed over with that unmistakable deer-in-the-headlights panic. For the first 2 hours he held his own. He navigated a tricky allergy request and managed to upsell a bottle of Bordeaux. I was genuinely proud of him. Then the 6th stop arrived. They were a pack of 20-somethings, radiating that specific brand of loud, performative arrogance that immediately sucks the oxygen out of a room. They were seated in the deep corner booth of Garrick's section. At the head of the table sat their undisputed leader, a young woman with a sharp, angular face and an expression of permanent distaste. 10 minutes after they sat down, Garrick scurried over to my POS terminal. A thin sheen of cold sweat glistened on his forehead, and his hands were trembling so badly he could barely hold his order pad. He leaned in, his voice a breathless whisper. "Tamsin, I don't know what to do. They want a specific kind of braised lamb wrap. I looked at the menu 3 times. We don't have it." But the woman at the head of the table, she laughed at me. She said we absolutely have the ingredients in the back and told me to just make the kitchen do it. She said the other location makes it for her all the time. I paused, a stack of freshly polished soup spoons dangling in my hand. Oak Haven had exactly one sister location across town, operating under a different name but the same ownership umbrella. It wasn't entirely out of the realm of possibility for the kitchen to throw together an off-menu item, provided the line wasn't swamped. I could have marched over to that table and politely, but firmly explained the concept of a set menu. I could have taught Garrick how to establish boundaries. But looking at his pale, terrified face, I knew a confrontation would shatter whatever fragile confidence he had left on his very first solo night. "Take a breath, Garrick," I murmured, giving his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "I'll go talk to the backline. If the sous chef is in a good mood, we'll get it done. If not, I'll deal with the table." I slipped through the swinging stainless steel doors into the oppressive heat of the kitchen. Thankfully, the rush was dying down. The cooks, who had a soft spot for Garrick's donut deliveries, grumbled for all of 10 seconds before slapping some flatbread onto the grill. Problem solved, or so I thought. Getting that off-menu wrap wasn't a victory, it was blood in the water. It signaled to the sharp-faced leader that Garrick was malleable. Over the next hour, she orchestrated a masterclass in psychological torture. Every single time Garrick approached the table with a requested item, she would instantly demand something else. He would drop off a side of truffle fries. She would sigh loudly, roll her eyes, and demand a side of yoli that wasn't on the menu. He would return with the yoli, she would demand a fresh glass of ice, complaining the ice in her water had melted too fast. She ran him ragged, forcing him into a relentless, exhausting pendulum swing between the corner booth and the kitchen. He had no time to check on his other 3 tables. Seeing him drowning, I gave him a curt nod and seamlessly absorbed his remaining tables into my own rotation. I refilled their drinks, ran their plates, and processed their checks, effectively doing double duty so Garrick could survive the siege in the corner. I caught him near the coffee station, his shoulders slumped, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a precipice, genuinely contemplating throwing his apron into the espresso machine and walking out into the night. "Garrick, listen to me," I said, my voice low and fierce. "You are doing fine. She is a nightmare, but she is just one table. I am handling your other guests, and I am not touching a dime of those tips. They belong to you, just get through this." He swallowed hard, offering a weak, trembling smile. "She asked me if I was stupid, Tamsin." Loudly, the whole table laughed. A hot, prickling sensation erupted at the base of my neck. My grip on the coffee carafe tightened until my knuckles turned white. There is a universal code among service industry workers. You do not humiliate the staff. But the night was winding down. The restaurant was emptying out. Soon, the kitchen would close, the lights would dim, and this wretched group would be forced to leave. Because they had arrived so late, they were the absolute last table left in our section. The bussers were already flipping chairs on the opposite side of the dining room. Garrick finally approached me at the wait station, clutching a leather checkbook. He looked utterly defeated, a hollow shell of the man who had walked in for his shift. "Tamsin," he whispered, his voice cracking, "how do I process an employee discount, and is it possible to stack them?" She wants to use 3 different employee numbers on a single ticket to cover the whole bill. I froze. The ambient noise of the restaurant, the clinking of silverware, the low hum of the jazz soundtrack seemed to drop away. "Wait. Employee?" Garrick nodded miserably. "She said she's a senior trainer at our sister location. She spent the last 20 minutes telling me I am the most pathetic, incompetent waiter she has ever encountered in her entire career. She told me I should quit before management fires me. Oh, and she also said there are 3 birthdays at the table. She wants 3 free slices of the dark chocolate ganache cake, and she wants the entire staff to come out and sing the company birthday song." Immediately, to say I was angry would be a severe understatement. Anger is a hot, flashing thing. What I felt was a sudden, icy clarity. Lava is warm compared to the absolute zero of the rage that settled in my chest. This woman, a trainer, someone whose literal job was to uplift and educate new staff, had spent 2 hours systematically breaking a sweet, anxious older man on his first solo night, purely for the sadistic joy of flexing her meager authority. And now she wanted us to reward her cruelty with free cake and a serenade. "Garrick," I said, my voice eerily calm, "go to the walk-in, plate the 3 slices of ganache cake, do not bring them out yet. Just wait for my signal." Leaving him in the kitchen, I marched straight to the front-of-house office. Royston, our floor manager, was sitting at his desk, counting out the register tills. Royston was a tall, impeccably dressed man who ran his floor with the precision of a military tactician. He was famously protective of his staff. I closed the office door behind me. In under 60 seconds, I delivered a surgical, rapid-fire debrief of the evening. I detailed the off-menu demands, the incessant running, the verbal abuse, and the final, crowning insult. A sister location trainer demanding stacked discounts and a performance after tormenting a first-day rookie. Royston stopped counting the cash. He slowly looked up, his eyes narrowing into cold, dark slits. At Oak Haven, the word-of-mouth philosophy meant we relied heavily on mutual respect. A restaurant employee, let alone a trainer, acting like a tyrant in a sister establishment was the highest form of treason. "She wants to stack 3 employee numbers on one check?" Royston asked, his voice dangerously soft. "Yes," I replied, "which she knows is against corporate policy. And she wants a song." "She demanded it." Royston held out his hand. "Give me the employee numbers." I handed him the slip of paper Garrick had written them on. Royston glanced at the digits, a terrifying, predatory smile touching the corner of his mouth. "I have a phone call to make to a certain general manager across town. Tamsin, gather the staff, give the lady her song." "Can we do it my way?" I asked. Royston's smile widened. "I insist." I sprinted out of the office and began moving through the restaurant like a ghost, grabbing every single employee still on the clock. I pulled the bussers who were wiping down the bar. I dragged the line cooks out from behind the grills, their aprons still speckled with grease and flour. I even hauled the dishwasher out of the pit, his hands still dripping with soapy water. In total, I amassed a small army of 15 exhausted, deeply annoyed restaurant workers. I huddled them in the hallway just outside the dining room and gave them the 10-second pitch. Corner booth, sister location trainer. She verbally abused Garrick for 2 hours on his first solo shift and made him cry. She wants the birthday song. A collective dark shift occurred in the eyes of 15 people. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a unified, petty thirst for vengeance. I signaled Garrick, who emerged from the kitchen balancing 3 plates of rich, dark chocolate ganache cake. He looked terrified of the small mob that had assembled. I took one of the plates from his trembling hands and led the charge. The six-stop was sitting in the deep corner, laughing loudly, entirely oblivious to their impending doom. As our massive crowd rounded the partition and descended upon them, the leader, the sharp-faced trainer, leaned back in her booth, a look of supreme, arrogant satisfaction washing over her features. She crossed her arms, ready to bask in the subservience of the peasants she had conquered. We surrounded the table, creating a solid wall of aprons and glaring eyes. We dropped the cakes onto the table with heavy, synchronized thuds. And then we opened our mouths. We didn't just sing the Oak Haven Provisions birthday song, we unleashed a sonic assault. 15 angry service workers inhaled deeply and screamed the lyrics at the absolute top of our lungs. The acoustics of the deep corner booth acted like a megaphone, trapping the deafening roar and bouncing it directly back into the center of the table. It was an excruciatingly long, overly complicated song, complete with rhythmic clapping that we executed with the force of thunderclaps. The dishwasher was practically howling. The line cooks were barking the lyrics like drill sergeants. I stood directly next to the trainer, projecting my voice straight into her ear canal with operatic intensity. The smug satisfaction wiped off her face in a millisecond. The entire table physically flinched, their shoulders rocketing up to their ears. 2 of the women covered their heads, their faces twisting in genuine acoustic pain. The trainer pressed her hands hard against her ears, her eyes wide, staring at us in horrified shock. We didn't break eye contact. We kept screaming, holding the final, agonizing note for an uncomfortable, lung-burning 10 seconds. When we finally cut off, the sudden silence in the dining room was deafening. "Happy birthday," I chirped, my voice dripping with venomous sweetness. We turned on our heels and marched away in unison, leaving the table utterly shell-shocked, their eardrums ringing, their complimentary cake untouched. But the acoustic warfare was only the appetizer. The main course was waiting at the host stand. When the table finally gathered their things to leave, the trainer strutted up to the front desk, likely preparing to unleash a final tirade about our volume before demanding her heavily discounted check. She didn't find Garrick waiting for her, she found Royston. Royston was leaning casually against the mahogany podium, holding the restaurant's cordless phone. He didn't have a check presenter, he just had the receiver. As she approached, opening her mouth to speak, Royston held up a single finger, silencing her instantly. "The employee numbers you provided are invalid for stacking," he said, his voice a smooth, icy baritone. "Furthermore, none of them will be applied to your bill tonight. However, there is someone who would like to speak with you regarding your behavior toward my staff." He extended the phone toward her. The trainer frowned, her sharp features pulling into a look of confusion. She slowly took the receiver and pressed it to her ear. "Hello." I was standing near the coat check, pretending to organize hangers, perfectly positioned to watch the execution. I don't know exactly what the general manager of our sister location said to her. I only know that the arrogant, sneering woman who had spent the last 2 hours torturing a sweet older man suddenly went completely pale. Her jaw dropped, she stammered, her voice high and panicked. No, wait, you don't understand, the service was wait, please." Tears began to spill over her eyelashes, ruining her perfectly winged eyeliner. She gripped the edge of the host stand, her knuckles white, begging the person on the other end of the line for her job. But the general manager had already heard Royston's account of the evening. The verdict was final. Royston calmly took the phone out of her trembling hand, pressed the end call button and set it down. He then handed her the full-priced, completely undiscounted bill. "Your total is $247, Royston said, offering that same terrifying, polite smile. "Card or cash?" She paid in silence, her hands shaking so badly she dropped her credit card twice. She walked out into the humid night air, her friends trailing behind her in stunned, embarrassed silence. Garrick watched them go from the wait station, a look of profound bewilderment on his face. I walked over, slung an arm around his shoulders and handed him a glass of water. He survived his first night, and he never had another problem standing his ground again. If you take anything away from this story, let it be this. The people serving your food, pouring your drinks, and cleaning your tables are not your punching bags. They are human beings performing a demanding, exhausting job. And if you happen to be someone who works in the industry, and you choose to use your insider knowledge to be a tyrant rather than an ally, you are playing a very dangerous game of Russian roulette. Because service workers protect their own, and we know exactly how to hit you where it hurts the most. If you enjoyed this story of glorious, ear-splitting karma, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below with the absolute worst customer experience you've ever had. Until next time, remember, treat your servers well or prepare to face the music.